The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
First question I want to ask you is, and this is definitely a loaded question, but what's wrong with a theory test?
If we were short on time, we could do what's right with the theory test. It's quicker.
No, I want to know what's wrong.
So, what's the swearing policy on this one?
You can.
Cool, it's crap. It isn't fit for purpose, in my opinion. I don't see the point of it. I think there's a lot of issues for a lot of individual people trying to access it and take it. And if we go back to the initial point of why is there a theory test, it is to make people safer on the road, because that's got to be, the goal. The whole point of everything is to identify a minimum standard to make people safe enough. And it doesn't. The majority of people pass their theory test, and if we're generous, 2 weeks later, probably wouldn't pass it again. I say generous 2 weeks later because it's probably the next day or once they've walked out the theory test centre. It's a lot of the questions are pointless. To just three off the top of my head, etching your VIN number or number plate onto the window of your car, which everybody did in the 80s and early 90s. You can still buy the kit in Halfords. It is still possible. Maybe it will make a comeback, but no one does. Vehicle watch schemes. I am not aware of any that are active in the UK. There's still a question about vehicle watch schemes. And then topping your battery fluid up. Batteries are now sealed. I don't know of anyone that does. Maybe it still happens occasionally, but it's pointless. And if you're asking pointless questions, no one's going to give it the respect that it needs. We should make it worthwhile. I'm a big fan of a split system of, if mechanical stuff is important enough, then let's make sure that they go and do a 2-hour course that I bet Halfords would happily provide, sponsored at cost basis, because it gets people in the door and maybe they can give them a loyalty card. And I have had the conversation with Halfords, but they will want it to come from the DVSA before they're interested. Or if, even with eyesight, when you look at the practical test, well, let's get them to bring an eyesight certificate. The same thing with the theory. If first aid is that important, then let's have a little, okay, you go and do your 1 hour first aid, your 1 hour mechanics, and then you do your theory. So if it's that important, let's do it. If not, at the risk of putting myself out of a job, let's scrap it.
Do you think it should be scrapped, or do you think it should be completely revitalised?
No, I think there's really important information that people should know. But if you're not going to even do it slightly properly, then probably, I don't think there's anything on the theory that people will not have learnt in the car with their instructor that will affect safety. They might end up getting, an extra parking ticket from doing something that they shouldn't have, or they, going into a yellow box, which is more an inconvenience than a danger. But I think that it needs to have a point, and if there isn't a point, or having had a conversation with Graham Hooper yesterday, a learning goal, which is a phrase I'm trying to use more. It doesn't come naturally. Point is more my thing. If there's not a point to it, then I just don't see why we're doing it. Let's change it. Let's make it better. And then, because you wanted the long version, you wanted what's wrong with it. The majority of my pupils, and this is slowly, the proportions are changing, have some kind of additional need. They're coming to me because they're failing, not because they want to pass and starting at the beginning. So the accessibility for people, it's a very written test. It's very wordy. It's not well written. The accessibility of it is not good, even with additional accommodations. The very fact they're called additional accommodations, and it sounds like they're going to put you up in a hotel for the night, is, extra help. Let's call it that. extra support if you don't want to make it help. But yeah, let's make it accessible, and improve the way that we can do that.
Just to clarify, when you talk about your pupils, you're not referring to your learners, are you? You're talking about the people that come to you for the theory test.
There's a mixed bag question. They are my learners from the point of view I
Yes.
don't have a car. This is partly a sore point because I'm still a driving instructor without a car. Theory is still a driving instructor's domain, although not regulated by the DVSA. So if they don't like it and take my badge, I get to still work. So you don't have to be a driving instructor to teach theory. I think you should have to be. I think that would be brilliant. And if we made it that it was just driving instructors, maybe we would then take it more seriously. But so from my perspective, they are my learners because I see it as one whole thing. But no, it is the people that I am doing theory training, theory support, theory advice with, because I work on a number of different levels.
If we are just kind of oblivious going about those day-to-day tasks, we're not noticing that stuff. We're not noticing, like you said, when something's affecting us, are we?
No, that's right. And the trouble is as well, the way we live in our society, it's all about the way we deal with things is to numb and avoid. So even if it's a subconscious thing, we feel a bit narky. We might not even realise we feel anything or we feel a certain way. It's just an accumulation of things, and it might play out with us exploding at somebody or getting cross about something. But it just comes down to us I've just lost my thread there. I've just lost my thread there. You're going to edit this, aren't you?
No, that's staying in.
Oh no, I've just lost my thread. So you were just saying, just remind me what you just said.
I can't remember. I'll tell you what, let's go with this. Because like we said at the beginning, mindfulness isn't specifically meditation. It's about being present, as you just were, clearly. It's about being present in the moment. So when what would constitute that? So does it need to be sort of specifically sitting down being silent, or could it be wrapped up in something that you love doing and enjoy, where you just something where you don't see that time just flying by?
Yeah, that's it. It's conscious choice, isn't it? It's just choosing something, because we get caught up in certain patterns of behaviour, and that kind of escalates, into a situation that might not be beneficial or helpful. But it's choosing something that is going to feel better to be with. So that could be, for example, I might notice I'm massively ruminating about something or replaying a conversation that might have upset me. And I can either, on a subconscious level, get caught up in that, or I can notice, that rumination is making me feel worse. It's making me feel bad. What's my choice here? And that might just be as simple as just sitting and looking out the window and noticing the sunshine and the blue sky, and just taking a breath, noticing my feet on the floor, noticing the breeze against my skin, just coming into my physical, what is really happening right here, right now. In this present moment, how am I in this present moment? Well, right here in this present moment, I'm okay. I'm safe. I'm warm. Nothing bad is happening right now in this present moment. And it's the ability to bring ourselves back, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that's something that you speak about a lot on your mindfulness course that I've been on. And it was that breathe thing that was almost an eye-opener for me, because I'm the sort of person that will just get wrapped up in 10,000 thoughts, and then you start stressing and panicking and the whole world's against you. And I think, just have to remind yourself sometimes, just stop, take a couple of breaths, go get a drink, you're all right. Like you said, right now you're okay. Right. I think the other one I'd throw in there, when stuff's going a bit mental in your brain, there's a chap called Richard Nichols, a psychotherapist, and he's actually been on the podcast once, but I listened to one of his podcasts once, and he was talking about when your brain's going hell for leather, think of a stop sign, and you don't have to actually shout it, but mentally shout the word stop. And what it does, it cuts off all those thoughts, and then go into what you've just been talking about. I'm breathe.
Do you remember there's an acronym that we shared on the course, and it's the STOP acronym. Remember, and I actually posted a little postcard, and the acronym is STOP, and STOP stands for stop, take a breath, observe, and that observation is exactly what is here right now. You know, what's that internal barometer saying? What's the weather like right now? Observe and then proceed mindfully. So then I can, it's almost like breaking that electrical circuit, you know, because I know exactly what you mean with rumination. I used to do it all the time, really badly. And it's like an electric circuit. But when you learn to break that circuit, you're just putting a block. It's a circuit breaker, and you're just able to stop, take a moment, breathe. And by the time you've done that, you know, and done whatever you need to do, often something else will have happened, and you'll be thinking about something else.
I'm slightly moved because anyone watching this video will have seen my expression when you say, "Do you remember the acronym?" I'm like, no, I don't remember any acronyms. I'm appalling with acronyms. They don't stick, and there's too many. They don't work for me. But yeah, so I think, like you said, then it can be anything where you take a moment or we get lost in that moment. What are the bad habits do you think that prevent us doing that? Because not my big one is my phone, and it's that habit of I'll pick the phone up and I'll start scrolling or I'll check, and not consciously, that's a subconscious habit picking in. So what are the negatives of doing that? What are the big bad examples?
Well, I think, and I hear what you're saying, I think it's recognizing what patterns of behavior don't serve us. And you've just identified that you feel that constant checking perhaps, you know, isn't to that level is going to be that useful to you. And I suppose it's just developing strategies to help to manage it. One thing for me, I noticed how the news was starting to make me feel, because it was incessant. Like my husband would have it on in the morning, it'd be on at lunchtime, it'd be on in the evening, and it was incessant. And I really was aware of how it was making me feel, like I'm sure it has a lot of people. And I went away on a retreat for a week, and it was no screen time, no phone, no TV, nothing. And it was heaven, absolute heaven. And it made me realise, well, actually, I've got control over this. So when I came home, I was much more discerning with that, you know. So I've asked my husband, he's been great. We just have breakfast together now in the dining room. We don't have the telly on. I don't have it on at lunchtime. It means I'm more productive because I do chores and the bits and pieces that I have the radio on now. So I tend to do more, you know, it's more productive. And the things I do sit down and watch, I have the intention to do that. So I suppose with the phone, I know exactly what you mean. And I find for me, it can be useful to leave it downstairs. I've got a little alarm clock. I bought that because I was doing the same thing, Terry, just spending too much time looking at my phone. I've got a little alarm clock, leave the phone downstairs, and then I can't check it. But it's recognising the things that we do that we think, oh, actually, that's not ideal. Maybe I need to change tack there. But it's the only way we can do it is to work out a strategy that is realistic and is going to work.
The best selling in the world is just having a conversation, because it's no pressure. Like, I don't need to convince you to do anything. I just need to have a conversation with you. And if you like me as a person, I said, hey, I fulfill an exact thing that you need to do. You can pay me for it. You're like, great, jobs are good, and let's get going. It's as simple as it is. So you guys are selling, but just change the term selling in your head from like, oh, I've got to do stuff. It's more like, I'll just have a conversation with people. That's all you're doing. Just start conversations really easily. And the second thing is, it's about who you're applying that to. Like, I can think of someone that would love the 58 minutes of driving. I actually know them very, very well, and they're a dear friend of mine, because they love being behind the wheel. It's just their thing. They've been learning how to drive since they were young. When we were 18, they literally got their driver's license like 3 days into being 18, because they'd spent so much time learning how to drive from the time they were 15 and 16. Not always legally, but they actually were just doing it because they just wanted to get behind the wheel. They actually could, because they saved up, they went and got it. I think it was 3 days is how long it took them for actually to go from their first lesson to being expedited directly to just go get your driver's license. You already know what you're doing. You've already passed your theory. You just need to just get this now sorted. We don't need 10 lessons. There's a bit of a legend for it. But at the same time, I know people who are so anxious they can't be on the road for that long. Like they can only be on the road for a short space at a time because for them they need to have the back and forth. So you got to know who you want to talk to and be the instructor that just speaks to them. So if you're like the 58-minute person, probably attracted all the right people that they were looking for. Whereas you wrote your post and you attracted all the people that you were looking for. Doesn't mean either one is wrong. Just means they're different styles of teaching.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, because something I speak about a lot on here is that I never work with anyone that I don't like. Because I'm stuck in a car with people 2 hours at a time. I don't want that in my day if I dislike them. That doesn't mean I'm going to love everything about them. It just means that it's got to be someone I want to work with. And that filtering starts from me with what I put into the world. So the fact that I, in the past, have spoke about being an ally to the LGBT plus community, the fact that I shared stuff around Black Lives Matter, the fact that I was following the guidance around COVID and stuff like that, it meant that if I come across someone that was homophobic, for example, they're not coming to me because I've already filtered them out. Because why would they come to someone that's embracing that? And one of the things I see a lot in our industry is instructors complaining an awful lot about the people they work with. So is there any sort of advice you could give us that could help us filter out those people that come to us and pre-filter almost?
Yes. So this is going to sound really counterintuitive to the part I'm going to say, because I don't want it to be, but I need to speak to everyone here. There is a huge shift more towards liberal values in most businesses. And for some people, that is just not who you are. Not that you have anything wrong with anyone or whatever it is. You're just kind of like, this is not the type of person I just naturally gel with. We have different opposing views, and you're human. You're allowed to have your own views. That's all I'm saying. What I'm saying is, at that point, don't front as if you're a different type of business, and don't even mention it. Don't even go into like, I don't work with trans people. I don't work with blah, blah, whatever it is. No one cares. You know, it's not a huge thing. If you don't do it, just say, like, if someone comes to you for driving help, try and find something you get along with them. But if you don't, just walk away from it and be like, actually, you know what? I have the right person for you. It's not me. I'll send you along to the right person. This makes a great deal for you because you can actually get into, if you're a very conservative person, reach across like the aisle, so to say, and find a very liberal driving instructor. So if you get any liberal people come to you, you can be like, hey, listen, you can go to that person over there, and that's great. And they can send you like a commission, or they can send you some business back where they've dealt with someone that is not in their liking. Like, hey, you should go work with Steve. Steve would get along with you. It's just a way of building referrals. But let's just take that away from what it is and go with, how do you filter people out? Well, talk about what it is that you want to talk about. Because some people don't care about your politics, your gender, the ideas that you have. They just don't care. They're like, look, you're a driving instructor. I'm here to learn how to drive. That's all I need. You can be okay with that. If that's the type of person you are, where you're like, I don't really want to talk about my politics, ideas, or whatever it is, great. You've got a perfect match made in heaven. You can even make a whole ad about that, which is, want to have a driving instructor that literally just sits there and teaches you how to drive and helps you get through your exams so you have a great time. Don't care about my politics, nor do I want to know about yours, but we actually have a great time of just being respectful to one another. Superb. Let's get on a call and see if we actually are a fit, or whatever it is the next process would be. Because the reality is, you're filtering out. If you're someone that is on the opposite side, very much like you could talk about all the stuff that's there. I follow this, I do this. You're basically showing who you are out loud and attracting people to you. If you're the type of person that doesn't naturally do that, then talk about what it is that you do. Don't talk about what your politics are. In fact, as I just said, you can say what your politics aren't. And just say, I don't want to talk about it, but I want to help you. That's it. Here's what my students have said. There's a bunch of ways to actually tell people how good of a driving school you are, how good of an instructor you are, without going into personalization of ideation. You can have something on there that just says, while I am tolerant of others and who they are and what they do, I absolutely am not tolerant of these types of people. Because again, I was going to say the COVID thing really divided a lot of people down the middle, because there are some people that were exempt from wearing masks, like myself. which I got a lot of evil eye from. Everyone was like, "Oh, you're not wearing a mask." I was like, "Yeah, because I legally can't, and it's actually bad for my health to wear a mask, because of like how my respiration has been for the last couple of years." They're like, "Oh, okay, fine, fair enough." But at the same time, I don't hold anyone else to that. Like, if you told me, like, Adel, I can't be a driving instructor unless you wear a mask. I'm like, well, I can't wear a mask. I'm gonna have to find a different driving instructor, but nothing against you. Simple as.
It was a fascinating time for me actually because I remember, we were during lockdowns we weren't allowed to teach, so there was like 4 month period with no lessons. When we came back, I messaged all my students and said, "Look, I'm wearing a mask. It's stated that we need to wear masks in car. Do you have any
Mm-hmm.
reasons why you can't?" I think there were 2 or 3 that messaged me back and said, "Actually, yeah, this." And I'm like, "How about you bring a mask to the car? We try, and if it's not working the first 5 minutes, don't wear it." And they're all like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
no problem. Let's try that." And
Yep.
you said the word you used was conversation. And I hadn't put 2 and 2 together until I was saying it then. It's like, that's what it was. It was a conversation. And we came to something that worked for both of us. Perhaps if I'd have had a medical condition where I wanted that person to wear a mask, I might have had to say, "No, you need to wear a mask because of my medical condition. And if you can't, you'll have to go somewhere else, no hard feelings." But it's that conversation that you were talking about, isn't it?
Exactly. If you're kind of people, believe it or not, things just work out. They really do. People are way less dickish than you realize.
Yeah.
They can get very hard. Like the way I look at it is, most of my friends are extremely out there. I have friends that are very politically conservative. I have friends that are extremely liberal. And I have some of my best friends that spring along the entire spectrum of what it is. I live in the middle, which I know people go, how could you live in the middle? I actually do live in the middle. Because my rule is, well, I'm not going to say that, well, actually, the C word. I'm just going to use that one because I know it can offend some people. Don't be a C word, an a-hole, or a dick. And essentially, we'll all get along. Happy times. Great. I won't judge you. You won't judge me. We're all good and well. Everyone each to their own. Where I have a problem is if you start telling me what I need to believe and why, then we have an issue. But other than that, I'm like, nah, as long as no one's getting hurt and everyone's happy, we're fine.
Generally, and especially with like Focus Corp and motorsport, 100% doesn't matter who you are. They're welcoming regardless. They've got other women racing in the championship as well. In the general automotive industry, however, that's where I've experienced some challenges with it. I mean, generally, I just let comments go over my head. I don't really care, and there's not much people can say that I haven't heard. I've worked with cars since I left school. So there's not much new that someone can say to try and annoy me. But it does wear you down a little bit sometimes when it's constant and it's the same old jokes. You just think, like, just get a new line. At least try something unique, mate. If you're going to try and insult me, come on, just choose something there that you've actually thought of yourself. But generally, motorsport wise, it doesn't really matter. We all put our helmets on. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. We all look the same, don't we? It's all just about going out and having some fun.
Yes, but I want to touch on that a little bit because we spoke about the
Yeah.
social media stuff before and about some of the negative stuff, specifically with driving instructors. And I don't think I'm misremembering this, but I'm pretty sure you posted the other day showing some bloke, bitching about you being a female driver or whatever. And it's like, how do you deal with that? And what advice would you give to other people? Because, and I suppose specifically women in this instance, but like you said, it's tiresome. How do you keep going when that's something you're facing?
It is tiresome. It's really tiresome. I posted the other day because I got a little bit frustrated with it all, but it was International Women's Day, as you might well be aware. And I just thought it was appropriate. The article came out the day before on purpose so that people could read it. And they were just trying to give a little push to women doing something a little bit different. So I felt the article was really well timed. And yeah, there was a few comments. It's always interesting though. The comments were made under the article itself on the website rather than on Facebook. So the people had usernames rather than their name or their profile, which is, you make your own mind up whether that's relevant to the comments they made. But yeah, there was a couple of comments and some of them are meant in jest. I know they're not from a bad place, but they are exhausting. And you just think, well, all you're doing is feeding this narrative that women are terrible drivers and blah, blah, blah. And to me, it's damaging. I know it might just seem like an innocent joke to most. And yeah, I mean, I'm the first person that can laugh at myself. I'm always taking the mick out of myself, and I like to think I'm not really big-headed or anything. But there's only so much you can listen to these same old, I'm going to quote, jokes and accept that they're funny. You know, it's not a woke offense, like offended thing. I just think when you've got young girls who are potentially looking at a career in the automotive industry or racing or anything of that sort, they're reading that. And that narrative is fed in from them being a kid that women can't drive, women aren't good enough to do that job, it's a man's job. And it's just not true. I think we just need to stop that. Let it just be. Let people do what they want to do without having to take the mick out of it. I hope that makes sense, the way I think of it. There was, it wasn't mentioned in the article actually, because it was all about the racing. It wasn't mentioned that I was a driving instructor, but yeah, one of the comments was, yeah, but can she parallel park though? And so my response was, well, I hope so, because I'm a driving instructor. And he disappeared after that. He didn't come back. One of them was something about women not being successful in motorsport. Let's see if she's successful, like really kind of snarky about it. And I thought, well, it's just a really odd way of thinking of it, to assume that somebody who, I've said in the article, I'm starting out, this is my first time really racing, to think that I have to enter at the top of my game, right on the podium straight away, otherwise you're no good, is a really bizarre thing, because I've not seen any gentlemen questioned about, why aren't you straight to the top of the podium then? You can't be very good then, can you? But it's just this weird, like, you've got to start somewhere. You've got to learn. And do you know what? It doesn't matter if I was at the back for every race I ever do for the rest of my life. If I'm enjoying it, someone's got to be at the back. It doesn't matter, I don't think. But yeah, you get these really bizarre comments. Sometimes you just gotta, or I do, I just ignore them. It's hard. You've got to be a bit thick-skinned with some of them. But yeah, you've got to be, either ignore them or kill them with kindness, I think. Because if you reply just as arsey as they've been, they love it. It's like catching a fish, isn't it? They just reel you in, and all they want is a bit of online banter, and they think that they've got you, so you just ignore them or be super nice. I actually offered somebody to come and have a go at my job once, because he'd made a comment online about, he didn't think I'd see it, but he made this comment and he said something about being in the kitchen. And I thought, oh, here we go. So I left it at first, but he just kept picking. He just kept putting little comments under the video. And at the time I was working with the British Drift Championship doing presenting work. So we were like live presenting to like 1 million people. I was 100% out of my comfort zone, but I was loving it. I was learning loads. I was improving at the job, and not the best presenter in the world by far, but just enjoying myself. Anyway, he made this comment. And so I said, well, if you'd like, at the next meeting, you be my guest, I'll pay for your ticket. You can come in and you can come up to the commentary tower and you can come and see what we do. And you can then tell me if you think it's really easy and that I should be in the kitchen. And that was one of the best ones, because he crawled back in his hole and he just kind of shrunk and he was like, oh, I'm really sorry. I didn't think you'd see my comment. The online world is such a strange place. It really is. You've just got to be thick-skinned.
Doing this podcast, the only people that ever cancel me are driving instructors. It's never like the external guests. It's driving instructors that cancel me.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there you go. But yeah, so we're talking a little bit about CPD there, and there is a big gap in the market in terms of CPD at the moment, and both of us provide, I suppose, very different forms of training when it comes to that. But I'm going to come to you first, personally, because I like because I think the industry, in my opinion, at the minute there's a lot of fractured stuff in the industry. It's quite fractured in places. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of negativity towards the DVSA. There's a lot of negativity towards training providers. I think there's a hell of a lot of good in the industry as well. There's some awesome people. I'm talking to one of them right now. I won't say which one. But Well, if you if you took a step back, give me your thoughts on the industry as you sort of look at it as a whole.
Oh,
It's a
so the
big
industry,
question, but
here's a big question. If you were my pupil, I'd ask you if you could be a bit more specific. So should I ask you if you can be a bit more specific, or should I try and answer that huge question?
I want the general thoughts. What stands out for you? I think that's what I'm after. What stands out for you when you look at our industry now? Is it overtly positive? Are you seeing more negativity than usual? Kind of what's your overall feeling of it?
So my overall feeling at the minute is unfortunately largely one of negativity. I think there are some that are taking. I mean, Mick wrote his article in Kitmag this month was all about seizing the moment, and there's opportunities out there at all levels, from being a newly qualified driving instructor. You maybe don't need a franchise now. You maybe have that opportunity to, you'll never get a better opportunity to just start your own company straight off the bat. So there's an opportunity, seize it, be positive with it. Test waiting times, yes, there's an issue with test waiting times, but I suppose it depends how you look at it, and can you use it to your advantage and, seize the moment, be positive. We're seeing opportunities at the minute for us to develop, and there's plans that we've got in place that actually predate, but are needing to be completed. But we're getting asked questions about things that we're already developing, which tells us, the opportunities are there. So on one hand, it's quite negative at the minute. I just feel the overall atmosphere within the industry. People are getting tired of the waiting times, and it's not just learner tests; it's part 2s and part 3s for PDIs. That's all starting to weigh down on people. I think, and it might be, I don't know what you're going to ask us about later, but there might be more opportunity to talk about this later. But certainly, within my area, there's negativity from ADI examiners, and that's weighing down on people. And I'm hearing lots and lots of stories and people that are sad or fearful because of experiences that they're having on part 3s and standards checks, and that's increasing negativity and worry and fear. So on one hand, there's a hell of a lot of opportunities for people, and on the other hand, there's just a hell of a lot of worry, and frustration.
I mean, let's speak about that now for a second. You mentioned sort of the negativity towards examiners in your area. What's the? Have you got an example for us? What are you meaning there?
In general, like in all walks of life, you have different personalities and characters. But within my own area, it just seems like the atmosphere with the ADI examiners in my area is very much to talk down, very much to put people on the back foot before they've even got in the vehicle and started moving, to make suggestions really that throw people off. And it's a regular, we're hearing the same thing repeatedly over and over and over. And, sadly, it's not just one ADI examiner. And I do think there's issues anyway, even beyond that, within ADI examiners' ability to assess a lesson, to even fulfills all elements of their own syllabus of the standards. Certainly, because it is within their syllabus. Unit 1 of their syllabus is all about level 4 of the GDE matrix. It just seems that they're not capable of, or in many cases, because I can't do a sweeping generalization across the board, but in many cases, they're not capable of assessing what's required to affect level 4 of the GDE matrix, the third column. I mean, if you didn't laugh, you'd cry. But how do you go from all of that research that dates back to the early 90s? The GDE predates when it was created to 1980. updated in 1996, formulated in 1999. 2023, the majority of driving instructors aren't aware of what it is and why it is. And then DVSA say, yes, okay, we'll go with that. We'll change the way we teach. And yes, we recognize the importance. We'll put it into the syllabus, the need to educate people that the thoughts and feelings will impact on what they do. That's unit 1 now of their syllabus. And we'll change what we're trying to assess by making sure that the pupil evaluates the third column of the GDE matrix. And then we'll tell you to keep the wheels moving. If you didn't laugh, you'd cry. How do you do that? What sort of organization goes, let's do all of these things that require time at the side of the road, and then say, but we only want to see 40 minutes and we want the wheels to be moving? That 20 minutes of the wheels being static that they've took away from people, that should be given back to us with the proviso that what we want you to do with that is address human factors that cause collisions, to use it to create evaluation in your pupils so that they're breaking things down for themselves. Don't do it on the move, because actually what we know is that people, when they're focusing in one area, they can't focus very well in another. So don't create more risk on the road by trying to get them to do it on the move. Pull it up whenever you feel like it's necessary. Get them to evaluate it, break it down, and address human factors, because that takes time.
That's some knowledge right there. I'm always impressed when we get stuff like that. And I'm just going to come back over to you in a second, mate, but just before we do, what is there anything we as instructors can do to influence the examiners in the situation you're talking about there? Or is it just a case of us being as awesome as we can as instructors and then going and delivering this 40-minute session for examiners?
I think that at some point there needs to be a meeting of minds. You know, if I was to name names, it would be people that you know very well, you know, and coming together with DVSA and putting things out on the table and saying, well, these are the reasons why things need to change. And if things don't change, you know, we're featuring Road Peace charity in Kitmag, and we have done for the last couple of months. And they're looking at Vision Zero. That's never going to happen. I mean, it might never happen anyway, but it certainly isn't going to happen without the help of driver education. And in order to fulfill that and achieve that, driver education is going to have to address the 4th level of the GDE and work downwards, context of journeys. Those are the things that lead to collisions. It's not a lack of knowledge or skill. It's the journey that people are on, who's in the vehicle with them, what's going on, who they are, you know, what sort of personality do they have? There's a reason why extrovert characters have more serious collisions than introvert characters. And all of those things need to be addressed if we're ever going to get near Vision Zero. And if we don't do it, who's going to do it?
I think that's someone that's contributing towards that negativity as well. It's the way the DVSA is putting out there. You know, as you said, Vision Zero. I see very little about that from the DVSA. That's something they should be championing. And, you know, I do a little bit of work with Project Edward, which is every day without a road death. And it always amuses me when I post that online, because you always get someone saying, well, that's a stupid target. And it's like, well, what other target is there? You're going to kill 3 people a day or whatever. But I think that contributes towards that negativity you mentioned as well. But I could come over to you, Mick. Is anything you'd like to add to that, or any different take you've got, as we said, on the industry? Is anything that stands out to you?
Like Lee said, there is a lot of negativity in that. A negativity towards training, towards DVSA, towards the national companies. The negativity comes from individuals, and the negativity towards training comes from individuals, and you could put money on who it would be. There's certain people out there that just constantly, every time they post, it's a negative post. they think it's not, but when you actually read it, it is. It's negative. Sometimes it's a negative positive or a positive negative, or sometimes even a negative positive negative. Work that out. But but they it's instead of just taking a step back and thinking, hang on, I'm going to be positive today, and they don't. They just post the same negative. But on a positive side, there's a lot of positive stuff out there. There's a lot of people wanting to develop, whether that's a PDI or an ADI. There's a lot of people that are wanting to come on workshops or wanting to develop skills by watching videos or even asking questions on Facebook. But then you always get the negative ones that seem to shout louder, that put them down. So, I would love it if people were just to, like I said, take a step back and think, do I need to post this? Is it going to be of any benefit? And I do it quite often. I did it today. I went to reply to something and I got 3/4 of the way through writing it and I thought, no, sod it. And I just deleted it. And I just thought, no, I'm not gonna reply. It was a positive reply, but I thought my reply might just get some negative attention, and I thought I can't be bothered with it, so I didn't bother. What I did instead was I PM'd the person and sent them the info that way, because I knew that some people would make a comment. So yeah, the DVSA, there's a lot of negativity towards examiners, both LTES examiners and ADI examiners, like Lee said. But I'm fortunate where I am, the test centre that I use for learners, that they all seem to be pretty decent. I'm not saying they're brilliant. I was up there today, and there was an instructor up there he's a good friend of mine, but he's normally quite vocal, quite negative towards the DVSA. But he actually said today, we've got the best examiners around. And I agree with him. So you only have to look at the other test centres around where I am, and I don't go to them anymore. And the stories that I hear, and these stories are coming from my instructors that go to them test centres, and you're thinking, wow, totally different. ADI examiners, and Lee knows this, but we've got 3 up here, and all 3 of them are pretty decent. I actually heard a negative today about one of them, and I thought, that's the first time I've heard a negative. But Lee mentioned the GDE. One of the ADI examiners actually mentioned the GDE in a post-part 3 debrief that I was sat in the back of. And they asked me after, have you got any comments to make yourself? And I turned around and went, yeah, can't believe you mentioned the GDE, because I've never heard an examiner mention it before. And he turned around and said that when he trains examiners, he takes them through the GDE. He delivers a GDE session to them. So they do know it, but do they actually put it into practice?
If you wake up in the morning with an alarm and you always feel like shit, right? So if you're like, oh my God, I can barely drag my head off the pillow, it might not necessarily be because you didn't sleep well. It might be that you're waking up at the wrong time. So those sleep cycles that we go through, as I mentioned, they're between 90 and 110 minutes. They vary from person to person, but not in person. So if yours is 98 minutes, it's always 98 minutes, for example. So what you can do is decide what time you want to wake up and then count backwards in 90-minute cycles. So if you want to wake up at 6 a.m., like I'm not going to do backwards time maths right live on a podcast, right? So we'll have to work it out. But, backwards in 90-minute cycles, and that will give you the bedtime that you need. I would probably tack 20 minutes to half an hour onto it, just to have time to sort of get into bed and settle down. But what should happen is then you are waking up at the end of a sleep cycle, which is where you're sort of naturally coming out of REM sleep and you're going back into that lighter sleep. If you're waking up in the middle of a sleep cycle, you could be in deep sleep, and that just is horrible to wake up in.
I mean, I genuinely didn't think that my sleep could get much better until I made that change. And now I wake up in a much better mood because of that. Whereas previously it was always, I'd wake up grumpy, and I'd say I wasn't a morning person. It wasn't that at all. It was just I was grumpy because I'd probably woken up in the middle of a certain cycle. But
I mean, ideally, everyone would wake up without an alarm. And I know that obviously being self-employed, I'm in an incredibly privileged position to never wake up with an alarm. And that's the ideal. And I would say if you are able to find out, when your best time for waking up, if you could if you could go to bed and not wake up with an alarm for sort of 3 or 4 days in a row, you would find out what kind of time your body likes to wake up.
It's interesting you say that about being self-employed as well, because I would say 99% of driving instructors are. So we're in charge of our diary. Now, there's obviously mitigating factors to that. You've got other work-life commitments that you might have to take into account and certain students or whatever. But I think where we can do that. I'm in a privileged position now where my alarm is set for 8 a.m. and I usually wake up between 6:30 and 7. So like you, I'm not waking up. That alarm is a backup in case I don't wake up. And I think that as instructors, that's something we can be doing more, taking a step back and reflecting. We might not be able to get quite the diary we want, but we can certainly improve it. Is that something you'd recommend that instructors take a look at?
Absolutely. And I actually, I do something similar. Maybe something that your listeners can do, which is I change my routine depending on whether it's summer or winter. So obviously the clocks have just gone forward, and normally I would do client calls between 12 and 4 on my client days in the winter, because I don't like, I am very sensitive to the environmental cues. So as soon as it gets dark, I'm like, I need to go to bed, which is a problem in December, right? It's 4:30. But I don't really like to be working when it's dark, because it really affects, how I'm helping, the delivery of my service. So what I'll do is I'll do 12 till 4 in the winter. Then in the summer, I'll move my client calls to between 3:30 and 7 p.m. because it's still light. I get to go out midday and have a walk and, enjoy the sunshine a bit more. I have bigger time blocks of my work. And I can still be outside and see the sunrise and the sunset, which is, that's another tip I'll give you in a minute for improving your sleep. But I would suggest that if you are in charge of your own diary, you definitely should be, where possible. And I know it's not always possible, because I guess you have students want to practice driving at night time and stuff like that. So it's not always possible. But for sure, if you can arrange your diary so that you can maximize your sleep, it's certainly a good idea. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to getting some sleep tips from you in a second. But before we do, I want to just speak to you a little bit about the REM deep sleep and light sleep. They're the kind of 3 cores, aren't they? So for anyone that doesn't know, what is REM, deep sleep, and light sleep?
So deep sleep, I'll start with that one, because that's when you go to sleep, you go into light sleep. And light sleep is a little bit like deceiving, the name of it, because it sort of suggests that you aren't really asleep and it's not good sleep. But light sleep can be really restorative, and it's an important part of our sleep cycle. But that's the kind of the first bit of sleep you'll fall into. Then you'll, not long after you fall into sleep, you'll fall into deep sleep, or what we call slow wave sleep. So that is when your heart rate slows right down, and your, hopefully your heart rate drops before you're below your resting heart rate, and you'll be in quite, obviously a deep sleep. It'll be quite difficult to wake you up, but you are getting, that's the most restorative bit of sleep. And that's normally responsible mostly for physical repair and recovery. And it is when human growth hormone is also released during that period of sleep. So for anyone who's hitting the gym and trying to sort of grow some muscles and stuff, that's a really important part of sleep. But repair, recovery, all of that kind of stuff happens in deep sleep. And then next you'll move into REM sleep. So that's rapid eye movement sleep. And that is when you tend to dream. And that's because that's when your brain is doing a lot of the processing of the information and the emotions that have happened during that day. So as I mentioned before, if you've been doing a lot of learning, your brain will decide where all of those things, how they're processed and where they need to go. But yeah, the dreams are generally something actually really interesting that happens is sleep is really important for helping you separate emotions from memories. So there was this really cool study. Sorry, I keep going about really cool studies. They might not be really cool for other people. This really cool study where they got a group of people and they got them to sing karaoke. And obviously, you know, they were really bad at karaoke, but they got them to sing karaoke, and then they sleep deprived one group of them, and then they let the others have a really good night's sleep. And then the next night, the next day, they brought them both back, both groups, and they played them the original song and what their version sounded like. So obviously, they would probably experience embarrassment and stuff like that. So the people who'd been sleep deprived, their amygdala, which is kind of your fight or flight, you know, that embarrassing, like heart racing thing, that lit up. But for the people who'd had a really good night's sleep, it didn't light up as much. So it actually, sleep made them more resilient to those emotions. Because if you imagine if that never happened, and every time you remembered, oh my God, remember when I sang that karaoke song? If you experience the same intensity and level of emotion and embarrassment, it'd be really fucking intense, wouldn't it? To be like, go through your life remembering stuff. So that's another reason why sleep is important, actually, that REM period of sleep, for helping you separate the emotion from the memory and sort of making it bearable to live through it again. So that's what REM sleep is for. And then you go back into light sleep before you wake up.
You know, if someone's accountant has told them that they're allowed to claim that mileage, which obviously you're saying they can't, how would you respond to that person? Because they've been given, as you said, misinformation by their accountant on that.
It's pretty clear, and there's been a number of times I've just taken a screenshot of the Gov UK page, and it's quite a bold statement. It says, yeah, cars fitted with dual controls can't use the simplified mileage scheme. Obviously, it's then up to them how they interpret that and what they do, and go back to their accountant and how that's dealt with. I think the problem lies is because the majority of accountants don't deal with driving instructors, or they might only deal with 2 or 3. So they just deal with it in the same way that they deal with any other client. Whereas in fact, it's sort of a totally different kettle of fish.
And you're sort of specialist in this area, aren't you?
Yeah, it's the background I've come from. So I still own a driving school now. I've got a few instructors that work for me in the local area. And it's something I've been quite passionate about, making sure we get that information right so everyone's singing off the same hymn sheet.
And I think now is probably the key time to look at the tax. We're coming into new tax year. We're in April now. And with something like that, so, you know, if someone's listening to this and they're now panicking and thinking, crap, I've been, you know, looking at my mileage this way for forever, would you just be sort of immediately advising them that they have, at the very least, have a discussion with their accountant about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said before, a lot of the accountants are a bit naive that they don't know that information, and you don't know what you don't know at times. If you've always dealt with regular business users, you've never really had the need to search out why would it be different for a driving school. Most people wouldn't know that. So yeah, it's time to have a conversation and make them aware. And there's adjustments that can be made. So it's not like a big panic. You're not going to get HMRC knocking on the door. But it's important you have that conversation so things are made right, and that accountants continue to do the right thing in the future.
Do you know, it's a very, I don't know what phrase, it's maybe a personal question from my perspective, because whenever I do my tax, I always panic. I mean, look, we've had this discussion recently about how unorganised I am with stuff, and I lose stuff, and stuff gets mislaid, receipts and whatnot, and there's been times I've put my tax in late, all this kind of stuff. And I always have this panic that I'm going to wind up in jail because I've lost a receipt or something like that. And realistically, I would imagine you'd have to do something pretty significant for like, obviously you can get fined and stuff, but you'd have to do something pretty significant for any drastic action to be taken like that.
Yeah, it's really rare as a small business owner you're going to get prosecuted. If HMRC, and they do random spot checks, traditionally they used to do quite a lot with driving instructors because it was a very cash heavy business. I know a lot of instructors have gone more onto card payments and online payments, bank transfers over recent years. I guess mainly COVID sped that up a bit. But yeah, it's just about having some sort of paper trail. And I guess going back to simple things like making sure you've got a separate bank account. It doesn't need to be a business bank account, just a separate account in your name so that you can see exactly the ins and outs. Things aren't murky. Because if HMRC come along and you're trying to show a personal statement and you're, well, that was me, that was the missus, that was something else, and it gets really hard to justify your income and expenditure. So at that point, then you might end up with an adjusted tax bill, an extra tax down the line. Worst case, a small penalty. But I would imagine it's just really going to be expenses that if you can't prove them, you're not got to pay for paper trail. They're probably going to disallow them.
Yeah, and then I suppose above all else, it's the hassle and the stress that goes with that. It's going to be a big thing. But I mean, you mentioned there about tax, and I think you mentioned digital. We're heading that way now, aren't we? So everything's got to be more digital tax wise.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a delay. It should have been right now. April 23 was going to be the big start date, and then it was put back and back. And I believe at the minute it's going to be from 2026 with sole traders. It's a bit different if you're VAT registered. That's already happened. So if you're VAT registered, then you need to go for tax digital now. But I can't imagine too many sole instructors are VAT registered. There's no real benefit. So yeah, there's a bit away yet, but we're still encouraging, especially the driving instructor clients, to try and go down the digital route. Just keeps everything tidy. If you get the software, it doesn't have to cost the bomb. You can get some software for sort of £5-10. If you've got a NatWest business account as well, they do a free agent subscription for free. It's included in the cost, so it's not an expensive avenue. But with that, it attaches your bank feeds attached to your accounting software, so it's really easy to just mark things off as they come along, attach the receipts, mark down your income. But then also you can keep a track of your accounts more easily on a regular basis throughout the year. You can look how you're doing. You can start to put your tax away rather than getting to the end of the 12 months, or even still like no, you're just saying we're starting a new tax year. It hasn't officially got to be filed until the 31st of January next year. And a lot of people are waiting. Whereas if you're using that software, it's really easy to keep up to date. And then within sort of a couple of months, generally my sole trader clients, by May, June time, we've got everything done and dusted, and they know what the tax liability is, and they're all ready to go for the next year.
Yeah, I feel personally attacked there, Dave. I feel personally attacked.
I've been there, I've done it when I first started as an instructor, because it is one of those jobs you put off. You go out and you do your lessons in a day. And I've been there back in the early days before I had kids. I was doing maybe 8-10 lessons a day. Which a lot of people have forgotten about, but I think we've all been done there and done it at some point. And the last thing you want to do is come back and sort your receipts out or get your bank statements out at the end of the month and reconcile them. So I've been there and done it and left it till January and then go, where I'm going to get that money from the tax bill from. So we just want to try and help people to avoid that.
Before lockdown, I'd not sat in the back, but this lad's come back and she's passed him and giving him his feedback and all that kind of stuff. And then at the end, she just turns to me and goes, "You might want to check your front tyre though. Is it curb 3 times?" And I just thought, it was back in my head, I'm thinking, would I rather he'd passed her? Would I rather he'd grabbed that wheel to protect my tyre? But just on, sorry, go on.
I mean, on that same thing, sorry, but how many times you see that on Facebook? Whoa, this happened. The examiner should have been in there and stopped that. No, they shouldn't. That's not their job. They're assessors, not trainers.
Yeah,
good examiners, some of them do, but that's not part of their job. Only if they feel that their life is, their safety is compromised, will they intervene. Otherwise, they'll just let them hit the curb. It's not their job to stop them. It's not their job to stop them reversing into a car during a parallel path or whatever. So we misunderstand what it's about.
But see, I think that, we've probably brought about from instructors, but I think that students think that as well. One of the things I stress to the learners is, the examiner's job isn't to keep you safe. Your job is to keep the examiner safe. all they're doing is, like you said, is assessing them. But just a couple of points on I think the things you've said there. So the one, again, the example I use with my students for the fault and how it can be a fail or not is stalling, because I had 2 tests in the same week. I think it was 2019. One passed with 5 driver faults, and all 5 driver faults were for stalling, and one failed with no driver faults but failed for stalling because she did it in the middle of a junction and struggled to restart. And I'm like, so one person's got 5 faults for stalling and not failed, and one person's got 1 fault for stalling and failed. And when you put that to students, I think it sinks in a bit.
Yeah.
And then just the other thing I say is, when they're asking about would I fail on my test for that, I always say that your driving tests are a reflection of real life driving. That's it. So what happened in real life? And then you make them assess what happened then and go, okay, so was it dangerous? Did you, like, yeah, okay, then yes, you'd fail because you would have hit the lamppost if I'd not pressed the brake or whatever.
Right. So the simple thing is, the driving examiner is asking himself the question. The simplest question he's asking him or herself is, do I fancy sharing the road with these people on their own? So we have to prepare them to be able to drive on their own in all sorts of given circumstances, and that includes being sat next to by an examiner. So we've got to look at their decision-making process, because the way we prepare them at the minute is not right. We're not getting them to make decisions. We're trying to get them to replicate behaviours we think is appropriate. But if they don't think it's appropriate, then it's got. I mean, the classic thing, roundabouts. We search for this Goldilocks moment all the time. To begin with, they're going when they shouldn't. And then you go the other way, and then they're not going when they should. And we search, or it starts the other way. They're not going when they should, and then they start going when they shouldn't. And we whittle it down from either end until we find that Goldilocks moment where they get it just right. There you go, that's grand. Well, that's great when there's no pressure. What if the pressure comes? So we need to start training them a different way. Rather than teaching them stuff, we've got to engage in conversations. How are you deciding whether to go or not at this roundabout? How are you deciding? I don't know, they'll say. Well, if you did know, what would you say? And if that's okay, what circumstances would you not go? What circumstances would you go? What do you need to be able to go? Well, I need space. How much space? I need time. How much time? How long will it take you to get clear of any traffic coming from the right? I don't know. Tell you what, then, at the next roundabout, we'll stop. If there's nobody about, we'll stop, and then we'll start again, and I'll time it, how long it takes you to get clear. So we try that. Okay, so that's how much time you need. All right, okay. So you're helping them to see that you're hardwiring stuff into their map of the world, rather than giving them a shit ton of stuff to remember. Because guess what? When you're under pressure, you don't remember stuff that somebody else has told you. But you never forget things that you've worked out for yourself. You never forget your political views, your religious views, because you came to those on your own through a thought process, through a decision-making process. So you don't forget. And it's the same with learning to drive. We've really got to get away from this idea that, they can only learn to drive when we tell them what to do. They're sentient beings and they're bloody smart. Have a look at those of you anybody who doesn't believe that. Go on to ldclearnerdriving.com. Go onto their YouTube channel. I think it's LDC Driving Schools. I'll just type in Bob Morton into YouTube. I'll come up. And look for the lessons with Danielle. I don't think I ever gave her any instruction at all. And there you go. And 24 lessons later, she's through her test. Because I never have to do any lesson twice. We're not wasting time. She never wants to work on manoeuvres. And no, that was clear, wasn't it? I said, you don't want to work on manoeuvres? No. Are you sure? Yeah. She said, do you think I need to work on manoeuvres? No. She said, what do you keep going on about it for them? Because up to that point, every learner I'd ever come across wanted to work on manoeuvres on the road to test because they were terrified by them. Why are they terrified by them? Because there's a lot to remember. Where if they're working out for themselves, there's nothing to remember. It's hardwired as part of who you are.
I love a conference. And the reason why I've always loved this kind of thing is because, and especially in an industry where you often work on your own day in, day out, even if you work for a bigger company, you don't have colleagues as such. And what I love about my experience, especially of the intelligent instructor, is that is that everybody is in the same position, whether they're 5 years deep, 1 year deep, still training, or 20 years deep. Everyone who goes to that conference, because there are lots of people that don't, I think that's a great shame, but everyone who goes to that conference, they're all in the same kind of mindset, and quite often they know one another. So you meet someone who you met last time or that you've spoken to on Instagram, and they introduce you to another person. And, you know, Roland, who I went with, he's never been before, and I've only been as an exhibitor. I've never been as a PDI. So there were already people that I was aware of and that I knew and that I'd spoken to previously. And I haven't been for about 18 months, maybe longer. I went in 2021, and I was a bit daunted because it's not really, in my opinion, very well marketed. I don't know if I can say that, but I'm going to anyway. I don't think that the benefits of going to this kind of thing are very well marketed. And so I knew that I was going to see lots of people that I'd known from kind of my previous experience. And the second I walked in, I walked around the corner and I ran into someone that I knew from before. And they were so happy to see me, and we chatted for ages, and they introduced me to another person who we chatted to for ages. And so in that sense, it's not just the networking, because obviously, you know, I do social media. So I'm always kind of thinking about what collab can we do in this sense, and what will that mean to our viewer, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of a PDI who's done it before and royally fucked it up, coming back in and everyone being like, no, it's so good that you're doing it again. If you need anything, contact me. If there's any way I can help you, contact me. If you want to come and see me, come see me and I'll give you a run through. In that sense, you can't put money on how beneficial that is. In terms of the conference itself, looking at it from kind of an external person, as in I've done things like this before, I think there's so many things they could be doing, not just in terms of marketing, but like, I'm just on a run now, by the way. I'm just going to talk. But, you know, for a start, I think there were so many really, really great talks. Lots of them clashed. And I know that there will always be that in any expo or conference you go to. But I think some of them maybe were appealing to the same audience, but on at the same time. Don't ask me for an example because I've completely forgotten. And I think they had talks from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. Now, at Kempton, obviously, it's quite a lot smaller than Coventry, so there weren't loads and loads of stands, but there's lots of people. And I think what a shame that there isn't a dedicated time to actually network. You know, in lots of conferences, they have a breakfast, or they have an hour at lunchtime or 2 hours at lunchtime where you can actually dedicate yourself to going around the stalls. And then you're not sacrificing your time listening to all these amazing people who have got so much knowledge to impart. And you're making connections, and you're meeting people who are like-minded or who could help you, or, you know, you could help. And I think that for me was like, I came around being like, oh, I just wish there'd been time for me to network and time for me to see talks. And I don't know if that's just me, but that is kind of what I came away thinking.
I don't think it's just you, because other people have told me that before. I'm kind of split, because I think I agree with what you're saying. However, the way my brain works, I kind of like it that way, the way it is now, because I mentioned before, being an introvert, if it was like, oh, this time you're going to do this, and this time, that would be too much. That would be overload for my brain. So having it all in one day and going, okay, well, this is here and this is here, and I kind of plan my route through the day. That works for me. But I think I probably agree more with you on like the broad perspective, in that if there was a way to do that. But it's one of those things where, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, where you're just cramming as much as we can in the hope to attract as many people as we can. And
but I do think that one thing I will say about the stands, I think there were some really good people there, and I got chatting to some really, really good people, like Go Roadie. I think their app's brilliant. And there were some others as well. But I think as well, when I think about it as a new to the so what I think is this. Here we go. Wisdom with Laura. I think that we go to the Intelligent Instructor Expo because we know about the Intelligent Instructor Expo. We know about it because we're that kind of people, and likely we have connections outside of that who are also those kinds of people. However, coming at it from someone who is maybe interested in getting into the industry for a completely different reason, I don't know that I don't know that there's enough knowledge about who these people are and why they're good to listen to and who these stands are run by and why they're good to talk to, unless you already have that knowledge. And I think the expo is a great thing. I think every industry, and most industries do. I work with a commercial bird control company and they have a fucking expo. Like, everyone's got an expo, but I think there are so many people out there that would make amazing driving instructors. We need more. What are we actually doing in the context of the Intelligent Instructor Expo to attract people who want to but don't know how, or who have just started but don't know enough, or to come along and go, okay, this, because it's benefited me. I've met some amazing people, and I know that I can contact people if I'm having a bit of a nervous moment or if I need some advice. But I only went there because I was an exhibitor once. Otherwise, I wouldn't know this whole world existed.
Another question that I do get asked quite a bit is why I started the podcast. Now, I have spoke about this before, but again, this is way back in the early episodes. So I will mention again now, the premise for this podcast was always to speak to businesses and people and products that I believed in, that I endorsed, that I wanted to promote, that I wanted to showcase, and then showcase them. It was to give listeners information and inspiration on a regular basis and build up this almost Netflix style content where you can just dip in and go back and listen to this thing on coaching, or listen to this thing on the standards check, or listen to this thing on growing your business, or social media, or whatever it might be, to build up this wealth of content, because I don't think there was anything out there like it. There was a lot of on-demand stuff already out there when I started doing it, but there was nothing that I found, and I could be wrong, but no one showed me anything yet. There was nothing I found that was updated this regularly with this variety and with this quantity, and that was something that I've gone for from day one: quantity, quality, and variety. And I believe I'm producing that. As we say, there's over 100 hours of audio free available to you to listen to for free. So that's where it comes from, and that premise is still the same. I still want to showcase people, products, and businesses that I believe in. I still want to provide information and inspiration for people that listen. I hope that every single episode that someone listens to, they can take something from. I really do. I hope that from today you can take something, whether it's just learning something new or whether it's being inspired. Speaking of being inspired, that's another thing that I get asked about sometimes, which is people saying that how do I have the confidence to go out and do this thing, the podcast or whatever, when I talk about openly that I'm introverted and that I'm not an overly confident person. So how do I, manage to do this, if you like? I generally had a quite simple philosophy for a few years now, which is, be scared of the thing and then do it anyway. What's the worst that can happen? So, I go back to, this episode today. If I do this random episode and nobody listens, and I look at my stats and it doesn't have as many listeners, and people are switching off after 5 minutes when they realize it's just me, well, I can take information from that and I can go, okay, that's not what people want. So therefore, I won't do any of these going forward, or at least I won't do many of these going forward. Whereas perhaps if the numbers are really high and I get feedback from this, then I can do more of this. Who knows? But there is no failure. There is learning. That's it. If this podcast fails, whether it's the overall podcast, whether it's the episode or whatever, that's not a failure on my part. That just shows that what I was doing wasn't right. And that could be that I'm not suited to this, or it could be that there isn't enough demand for this. So when it comes to that idea of doing something like this, I think that often it's taking a step back and going, well, there is no failure. There is only discovery. I think I've just created that quote, so I'm going to use that. There is no failure, there is only discovery. And that is generally the premise I live with this stuff. We can even fast forward that to standards checks. There is no failure. There is only discovery. If you fail a standards check, yes, you have technically failed that standards check, but you have discovered what you need to do to pass next time, or what changes you need to make. So, yeah, that would be my answer around that one. I want to speak to you just a little bit about anxiety as well. Then I think it's relevant, definitely, because as we mentioned, that's the theme of this year's Mental Health Awareness Week. And I'm going to ask you for another definition. What's a definition, or how would you describe the word anxiety?
How would I describe the word anxiety? I mean, technically, anxiety is a bodily response to stress. I think anxiety often gets lumped in as being fearful. It is often, people think of that dictionary definition of being anxious, but it's not always presented in that way. It can be having too much energy. When you see people that are like pen clickers, people that click their pens, at their desks, the people that are fidgeting with their keys and they're tapping their feet. It can be people that become overly irritable about things that they would normally be able to let wash over them. You can see it in people that, I mentioned having too much energy. It can go the other way, not enough energy. People become incredibly lethargic. They feel like they're wading through mud, or fast-paced breathing, racing, like heart racing, palpitations, clammy hands. You might see people that become even angry. Some people get angry with it. I think that's not something that people often associate with being fearful or anxious. But there are so many different variations of how it might manifest in someone. But yeah, it's generally triggered by some form of stressor.
You just described 90% of students going for a driving test, which amused me greatly. So just to clarify then, because I think that's the first time I've heard it phrased that way, it would be like the physical manifestation of stress, essentially.
Yeah, that is what I would say that is.
And I think just before we move into looking at sort of the anxiety itself, do you think that this fascinates me? Do you think people use the term too easily? And obviously, you can't speak for learners, but I'll use that example of a learner will sometimes just say they failed because they were nervous or because they got anxiety or whatever. And a lot of the time, it's true. But do you think people sometimes use that as a bit of a crutch, a bit of this is an excuse for why I've done what I've done?
I don't know if it's an excuse. I do think the term can be used too much, especially if people are referring to it as a like a diagnosed, I've got anxiety, rather than saying I'm a little bit anxious. Having anxiety is debilitating. It can be absolutely, completely debilitating. Or saying I'm a little bit nervous, or actually my nerves got the better of me, is a better approximation than saying actually I've got. Because for people that are genuinely struggling with full-blown anxiety, that can destroy their lives for a period of time. It really does turn things upside down, and it shouldn't be belittled or palmed off as being just a little bit worried, because it's not just being a little bit worried. It can be huge, and it can be it can be attached with other mental health conditions as well. But at that point, if it's nerves over a driving test, probably better to say, actually, I'm a little bit nervous, or I didn't sleep very well because I'm worried.
Does it sometimes prevent like a mental block that stops people from doing something?
It can add to confusion, and you can find yourself with the brain fog, real brain fog, not being able to think clearly, not being able to get through your own thoughts properly, or even being able to prioritize at that point, because it's all quite overwhelming and things can then build up, and that can lead to panic attacks. So that potentially would get in the way of doing things.
That was a personal question, that one, a personal curiosity question. Let's So, can you sort of say the physical, or some of the ways it can display itself physically? So, if we were just pulled up to the driving test centre and we're waiting for the examiner, or we're in the car waiting to get out, and that student is clearly displaying some either nervous symptoms or some symptoms of anxiety. You know, you can see they're getting overexcited, they're sweaty, they're gripping the wheel, you know, that kind of stuff. What could we do to accommodate that, do you think, or to help with that, maybe a better word?
I think potentially talking it through before you get to that situation, teaching them maybe some breathing techniques that they can use before it gets to that point, so that if you're trying to teach someone something when they're already anxious and they're already in a bit of a state, they're not going to hear it properly. They're not going to be able to take that on board. It would be like trying to get a 2-year-old to dress themselves. Much like trying to get an octopus into a net bag. It doesn't happen. Just arms flailing everywhere and the mind's going round in circles. So I think teaching them to be able to ground themselves using all 5 senses so that they can use some slow breathing. So if they get themselves into that state, you know that you're going to get there in plenty of time. They've got time to calm themselves down. They're taking lots of nice, long, slow, deep breaths, getting that oxygen into the brain again, being able to calm that nervous system back down and focusing on where they are. Sometimes you'll see with anxiety, you get into a habit of having all or nothing thinking, you get faulty thinking patterns. So they get to the point, well, I'm never going to do this, I'm never going to pass. So being able to find the evidence that actually you've done this before. Remember, you've done that before. Remember the other day you managed to park like this before. Finding evidence that disproves that faulty thinking and being able to put them back on that track and fill them with confidence and reassurance, nice and calm.
I mean, road safety is just not sexy, is it? If ever we don't go to a lot of parties and things, but if ever I'm there with my wife, she's sort of trying. People ask what I do, and I'm explaining we produce VR film, and I'm in the media and publishing. She says, "No, you're not. You're in road safety. Like it's the most withering put down since your mum said stop showing off in front of your friends. It's like not the kind of thing that traditionally, perhaps dynamic people or people." With big ideas want to be associated with. I don't know why that is. I think it's the inclusion of the word safety and the sort of relatively mundane nature of transport. Unless you're an enthusiast, and I've never been involved in an enthusiast segment. There's a lot of amazing enthusiast stuff that goes on in transport, but we've never really fallen into that. But I suppose the other thing is that there might be an element of complacency. I think we've got some of the safest roads in the world, and road safety is still a very big issue. It's a huge cost to the economy. It's a huge human cost and all the associated other costs. But it's the story is pretty good compared to other countries across the world, even very developed countries. So maybe there's a sort of an apathy towards the need for it that there isn't in other areas of health and well-being.
Yeah. I think that runs across everything, doesn't it? Not just instructors, because I do other podcasts for like learners and stuff like that. And again, if the title says road safety, the numbers aren't as good as if the title says 3 ways to pass your driving test. And,
yes,
and
yeah,
really adverse to clickbait. I don't mind with spicing up titles. So I've already got my title for this episode, which is road safety isn't sexy. I'm not adverse to spicing up stuff, but I'm really adverse to clickbait. But I just want, do you think that potentially that could be something that attracts more people? Or do you think that if you use some sort of clickbait method to draw people in, they'd come, see what you're actually talking about, and then disappear anyway?
Yeah, it's an interesting one when you talk about clickbait in education. I remember reading a white paper some time ago all about rewriting email subject lines for better open rates, and actually that was quite transformative for me. It was things like generating self-interest, making something time limited, intrigue, and actually there's a lot to that. I think you're right. The way the media use clickbait and stuff is it from a news telling point of view isn't it isn't always that helpful. But from a road safety perspective, I think educators want to tell people what they want to tell them, rather than understanding what people want to be told and need to be told. We've got the Fatal 5, which is quite Fatal 4, Fatal 5, quite arbitrary. You go in, you talk to me about drugs and driving. I mean, I've always thought I would be super efficient on cocaine, I would get so much done, like, make more, film and products. But I'm never going to do cocaine. It's not raised that way. It's not something that I'm ever going to do. But people will talk to you about it. Like, I always wear a seatbelt. People will talk. But the things that perhaps I might be more likely to do, drive maybe a little bit fatigued and things. These are the things that perhaps resonate and are more receptive to. So I think we've got to understand, and this is really where driving instructors come in, because I think you have these pinch points. If you look at the Venn diagram of where people might be interested in road safety, it's when they're in a pinch point. So they're in a journey, like, the learning to drive process. And, there's a moment of high relevance. So, at that point, they're paying good money to learn how to be a good driver, or to pass the test or whatever. But they're receptive to information at that point. And then, a lot of the time we try and tell people things that they're perhaps not interested in at that moment, or can't do anything about at that moment. And if you can't do anything about it, then to some degree, we know the forgetting curve is quite steep for some of this stuff. So talking to people about it a long time before they can actually action it might be better to talk about something that they can put into action.
From speaking to you and from seeing your stuff online, I came across the phrase garage anxiety, and I've never heard that before. So talk to me about garage anxiety. What do you mean by that?
So garage anxiety is something that we see on a daily basis. It's not necessarily just new or young drivers. It's kind of drivers who have maybe been driving for the past 10 years. But I think since the pandemic, it's a lot more visual now. People obviously are a lot more aware of what the different mental illnesses are, because obviously during the pandemic, we all kind of became aware of different mental illnesses. So it's not necessarily a mental illness. It is more a fact of, if you have anxiety, it's more of an environment where it's going to be more heightened, if you know what I mean. So let's say you've just passed your driving test and you've been driving for 3 months. So you're kind of getting a bit confident and you get a flat tire. And in your head, you're thinking, oh my God, passed my driving test, but I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. What do I do? I've got a flat tire. It's stuck on my drive. And then it's like panic sets in. They're a bit like, oh, So what I'm trying to change is the fact that they would know what to do. So when my website's eventually launched, they would be able to just kind of go onto the website and it says flat tire, click on that one. Oh, this is what I need to do. And it'll say like, call a recovery company, or call your local garage to see if they do a call out, or have you got breakdown, blah, blah, blah. So the garage anxiety is like the fear of the unknown, because they have this perception. Unfortunately, in the motor trade, we have a perception that we are kind of like the con men and that we're just going to rip everybody off what we do. But realistically, most independent garages like ours, we're just working for a living and to keep our family business going. And that's what most independent garages do. So we are trying to keep our community safe at the same time. So I think we're just trying to change the perception of the garages and also stop the fear of the unknown, because if somebody has a flat tire, it's so easy to be fixed and it literally takes half an hour. So I just kind of want to raise the awareness to them that it's something they don't need to worry about, and they don't need to keep driving on it, or go to a petrol station and put air in it and it might go down again half an hour later and still be driving on it, because obviously anything could happen. So it's just a case of basically trying to stop these different things, and also trying to stop them from turning the music up when they hear a noise in the car, because they don't know what they need to do and they think it's going to be expensive, because most of the time a noise in a car isn't expensive, but it's expensive when you've turned your music up and you've carried on driving around on it for 6 months. So
is that a genuine thing that people do?
Oh, I have done it. So yeah, it's a genuine thing. But I think I should probably say that. But before, like, I was kind of involved with the business, I did something completely different. So for me, I was just, oh my God, I have to go and ask my dad to fix the car. Oh my God, he's going to go mad. So I think just turning the music up, you're a bit like, oh, I don't need to hear it today. I'll just deal with that tomorrow. But then obviously that then gets pushed down weeks and weeks and weeks. And we always get a customer that will come in and say, it did start about 6 months ago. So it could be something, it could have just been like a track end that's gone, or it could be the ball joint that's gone. But because they've carried on driving around on it, the suspension's been even more compromised. So then there's more components of the vehicle that's actually now needs replacing. So therefore it's more expensive. So, yeah.
What I come across a lot is people that are scared. And I've been in this boat. So I'm going to ask you from that perspective. If someone, maybe they've got an idea of what they want to do, but they don't know where to start, they're too scared to start. How can I go on social media and say I've done a thing? What do you say to those people?
Right. So is this someone with something or without something? Because I've got a slightly different answer depending. Is this someone with an idea, maybe?
Do both. Do both.
Okay, I'll do the idea one first. Yeah. All right. This is going to sound really basic and really patronizing and really fucking simple. Google it. Okay. I'm going to give you an example from my life. I have a business. My brand is called Coffee with Damp. No logic behind it. I woke up one morning. I used to drink. Don't drink any alcohol anymore. Nothing wrong with it. If you enjoy a drink, fucking fantastic. I still have lots of drinks in my house that I dish out to others. That sounds really dodgy when you say that out loud. But what I mean is that I've got, it's a personal choice for me to stop drinking. But when I was drinking, I was probably drinking a little too much. And I thought, I'll just have this Facebook group and I'll show up every morning. I'll teach. So basically, you keep me accountable, because if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And that will stop me getting pissed the night before. So, and then I'll teach you things that I'd learned from building all the agencies and all the marketing stuff I did. And so it's called Coffee with Dan. And I remember someone saying to me, not super long ago, last year, why ain't you got a coffee? And I'm like, yeah, that's actually a fucking good point, actually. Probably should have some coffee. And I don't know jack shit about a coffee business. So I went onto Google, how do you start a coffee business in the UK? That's it. And then I looked at the research. There were some Medium articles, there were some videos and stuff. Then there's a list of companies that did it. I emailed 10, 4 came back, had a conversation with all 4. One of the guys I just really fucking liked, we just got on like a house on fire, kind of touching what I said earlier. And then as of recording this week, I launched my coffee. We've sold hundreds of bags already. People actually love it, which is nice. It actually tastes nice and people think it's brilliant. But that's what it started with a Google search and thinking, right, okay, how do I do it? And just starting doing it. And the next thing was just to put it out there. Like with there's no guarantees of success. Okay. So if you've got the thing already, you need to learn how to market the thing. So I will say learning the basics of sales and marketing, both, verbally via the written word, copywriting, sales techniques, social media marketing. Like this sounds like a lot, but there are paid resources. And the reason I suggest paid first, if you have the penny spare, is because what you invest in, you kind of tend to put more weight into doing it. So there's this kind of, a lot of people don't value free as much as they should, which is silly because there's everything you possibly need is at your thumb tips. Okay. You just type it in and find the answer to pretty much anything you need. But if, money is a little tight, resources a little bit tight, there are free resources in there. And then the investment is going to be your time and energy. So that's the equity that you're going to be putting into that. But when it comes to like overcoming the fear side of things, I kind of touched on this earlier. Most people are just kind of concerned about their own shit. They're worried about their own problems. They've got their own issues, their own wants, their own needs. Like to really give too much of a shit about you doing your thing. And this is it. I'm very fortunate that I have worked with thousands of people, and I've been like at the start of some people's, stupendous careers. And I'm so proud that I was sort of like the spark for a lot of these people who've now gone on to achieve amazing things. You don't know how things are going to work until you put there. I met a chap, a mastermind I did. He was earning, say, about $4,000 a month. And I hope that doesn't sound facetious, but in entrepreneurship, that's kind of okay. Sort of like, you're doing all right. He was doing some copy and building some funnels, which are like sort of automated marketing systems. And he was one of the most talented, charismatic people. And I was just kind of like, you are playing so I shredded him. And then we're still friends. He came to see me in Brighton when I used to live there, and he was doing well. And he turned that business, so that conversation he decided to go and partner up with someone and launch a sort of coaching supplement kind of combination thing in the fitness space. And he did a hardcore version, and he had a relationship that was just kind of wasn't going anywhere. So he ended that. He cancelled his direct debits to everything. He literally turned his spare room into a gym, and he only left his house twice a day to go for a walk and get food. That's it. He did that for 9 months, and he made $1 million. I just saw an update from him the other week. Thought, oh, you look like you're somewhere nice. Yeah, he owns pretty much Germany's biggest independent payment processor now. He has no knowledge. In fact, he obviously decided, fuck it, I see an opportunity there. I'm going to go for it. So that fear, that worry is just holding you back from a future that could be absolutely fucking fantastic. Okay. But also, much like you said about the try things twice, I've done plenty of things. I thought, oh, that's what I want to do. I want to do that. I want to launch that. I want to try it. I did it. And I was like, this is a bit shit. I don't want to do this anymore. And obviously I didn't just cancel. So I sort of like wrap those things up and stuff. But it's a case of it's that whole regrets thing. Do you want to kind of, wrap up your life wishing you'd have tried things, wishing you'd have put something out there? Honestly, you're going to regret more of the things you don't do than the ones you do. And that's what I've learned from having, years of just going like, oh, fuck it, putting myself out there and seeing what happens. And I've made mistakes. I've screwed up. Things haven't gone to plan. I've lost money on stuff, but they are massively, outweighed by all the things that's gone right. And the book in itself, Terry, people kept asking me to do it, and I was like, oh, can't be asked. No one's going to want to read a book from me. I don't know how to write a book. So I did the same thing, posted on Facebook, does anyone know how to write a book? Someone tagged someone in, that person then became a friend. He's now my publisher. He came up with the hook for the book, and I was like, right. And I just sat down, wrote it in 3.5 days after a day's planning. My goal was to sell 500 copies. I printed off 500. I put a big event on. We're 1 million plus now. Like, it's insane. So again, you don't know until you put things out there. But honestly, it's a cheesy cliched saying you've probably heard, but all the good stuff you want is on the other side of fear. It really is.
If you have to be told that it's not okay to don't lurch over your young female driver, or it's not okay to comment on someone's sexual orientation or how they identify, or make sure you don't air your views on Muslim taxi drivers. It's like, if we need to try and not do that, then why are we on the register in the first place? Because if you still think any of that's all right, then you need a different type of check, like a reality one.
There's a different register for those people.
Right. Moving swiftly on, Chris. We recently did a podcast called The Green Room where we spoke about why does everything have to be standard check based. So on this episode with 6 traders talking about the standard check, how would you prepare for a standard check?
It was the episode in which I solved the DVSA waiting list. I wouldn't prepare for it. What I would do is make sure that every single lesson matches it, because then I don't have to.
Well, should the 3 strikes and you're out rule apply?
Yes. So I think it's sort of pointless without any consequences. Like, what's the point? You could just keep taking them and failing them. So you need that consequence.
I talked to an awful lot of trainers who have not read the National Standard for Driving and Radar Training. Well, bloody shame on you. We know what it is. They published this information in 2013, and as an industry, we're wandering around with our thumb up our backside and our brain in neutral, unaware of what they're expecting from us. And then we point the finger at them and say, it's just unfair. Great point, Phil, about the part 3. There you go, 8 seconds left.
Used to be a legend in the industry. Right, so...
Can I have my 30 seconds back, please?
No.
I think I would change it to a standards check every 18 months in alphabetical order, so we all know where the 18 months is, so we can constantly do the training that's required and keep it up.
I think the only thing I would change is that we have to evidence compulsory CPD every year when we do go.
If I was in charge of the DVSA, can you imagine that?
No.
I think they'd see me as a bit of an outsider. So I'd have to go in first day and do something crazy like changing the trigger for serious faults to 0.555 just so they go, he's one of us.
I might think about adding some stuff to it. Not sure about CPD in light of recent events, accredited courses. It's a tricky one, isn't it? It's a tricky one.
Awesome. Potentially another one that's poking the bear there, which is good.
I've been called woo-woo twice today.
And then the fourth year, free choice CPD, absolutely no restrictions. You can do anything you like. You can go and learn to be a pole dancer, Bob, if you want to. You could do anything you wanted under CPD, as long as you can prove a connection that is going to benefit you as a driving instructor. So
just doing a Google search on sturdy poles.
Get off my 60 seconds.
I will just chuck in here, actually, that I'm quite proud of myself with how we're doing this so far, because I must admit, there are some podcast hosts out there that couldn't interact with guests this way because they would have to get their own opinion across every 30 seconds. So this is fun. Let's move on to just keeping with the theme of poking the bear.
I'm wearing shorts right now. You can't see.
We're not marking you down for it, don't worry.
It's too hot.
I have a simple one to add, and it sort of ties into the stuff I was talking about before about dealing with customers and being professional. You know, number 18, I would add, has the ADI stroke PDI behaved like a dick on social media in the last month? If so, that should be a trigger.
Be a safety critical one as well. Gone.
We're not trying to reduce the amount of tests.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Like to add to the bottom of the sheet, and a bit like Emma said before, is a way of recording the CPD so the examiner could see that as well and mark that down. So it's just another, not a tick box, but a way of demonstrating that you do CPD.
I think, first of all, it starts now, like be training now. So never stop training, never stop getting better. That's how you prepare for a standards check. Don't wait for that letter.
I just want to say that I've just noticed that Bob's clock stopped. And I've only just realised.
He thought it'd get him an extra 60 seconds. That's what...
Well, I'm awesome because my mum says I am.
I'm awesome because Terry keeps having me back. So it's purely down to him.
So I'm awesome because I'm an individual.
I'm awesome because you keep telling me I'm awesome.
Cool, right?
I'm not that awesome. I'm very overrated.
I'm going to buck the trend and say I don't think I am awesome. I'm chasing awesome. I tend to say chasing excellence, actually, but we'll go for awesome today. And I think that makes you awesome because you're chasing awesome. And so you're constantly trying to be better.
I think the start of that hurt my head a little bit, but I'm going to take a moment to say to anyone listening, there's some fucking gold right there. Seriously, especially on last 3 questions about the actual practicality of the standards check. Seriously, just save this in your phone, get your standard check coming up. When you find out, well, do it anyway, obviously, as everyone said, prepare, blah, 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 blah. But when you've got your standard check coming up, go back and listen to this again. Doesn't just get my download numbers up, but it'll help you pass a standards check.
Can we just point out what is the worst Rocky movie in your opinion?
I mean, God, first of all, I don't think there is a bad Rocky movie.
There is one bad Rocky movie.
No,
okay, just one.
You're talking Rocky 5, aren't you?
Of course, everyone knows this, but
no.
I will say this: Rocky 5 is the only one that makes me cry. There's one scene in Rocky 5 that will always make me cry, but I'm not a fan of the rest of the movie.
Look, clearly it's not as good as the rest. It's not as good. You've got Rocky 1 and Rocky 2, which you can't give them both sort of 10 out of 10 because Rocky is the best of the lot. So it'd be like 10 and 9. 3 and 4 are just classic cheese 80s type of films. Rocky 5, if you'd maybe say 3 and 4 are an 8 out of 10, and I'd give Rocky 5 a 7. And then you've got Rocky Balboa, which
was amazing.
Yes, took me by surprise completely. I think I spent the first 20 minutes of that film thinking I was going to find it atrocious, and then just got completely absorbed into it. And by the end, I was bawling my eyes out.
It's such a good movie. Okay, let's just put it this way. So my order is I actually have Rocky 3 and 4 above 1 and 2. Like, I love 1 and 2. I grew up on the Rocky movies. 1 and 2 are amazing, but 3 and 4, like especially like Rocky 4 with the Russian, easily my favorite. The montage for that was wonderful. Hearts on Fire, are you kidding me? I'm all about that. Then you got Rocky 3, the whole Clubber Lang Mr. T thing was wonderful. Rocky 2 actually trumps Rocky 1 for me, because Rocky 1 was really Rocky 1 is a masterpiece. Don't get me wrong, it is a masterpiece. It's very highly regarded in many other areas, but in my list, I put it below 2 for one simple reason. 2 kind of gave me the complete feeling of like, this is the redemption arc. You see him really go out there and push himself. It goes to another level. The first one is, this is my shot. I'm going to try and make the best of it, which is everyone loves the underdog story. Now, we will say all 4 of these really rank highly. Like, I'm talking 9 and 10 level, all of them. I don't have a rating system for which one goes in the 9s and 10s. They're just in that pantheon. 5 is like a 6 out of 10 for me. Like, it's a real plummet off the cliff. And then Rocky Balboa. Rocky Balboa is like that's a 9. That's an 8.5 or a 9 for me. Just so well done. To actually get Mason the Lion Dixon, aka Tavares. Is it Tavares? I can't. Antonio Tavares. To get him to actually do this, to be part of it, was wonderful. Like, sorry, not Tavares, Antonio Tarver, the boxer. To get him to be a part of it and actually punch Stallone, and he took the punch, is never a thing. So we're getting off the point here. The reason I bring this around, because I saw that post, was simply because you said something about almost getting back to 100%, getting back to full capability of who you are and what you're able to do. I've been trying, and it's a selfish reason I'm asking, I've been trying to figure out how to do that with myself, because I've been coming out my own thing, even though I am as good as I am, I'm not the best I could be. Like, I know what's above. How did you get back? Like, what were the steps that you took?
I need to touch back on the Rocky ranking for a second.
Please go for it.
I would never argue with anyone over their Rocky rankings, because I love all the films. So whatever order you put them in, I'd be happy with. But I will just say that I think the reason I love Rocky 1 the most is because the exact opposite to you, I think. It's because, and I'm spoiling a film from the 70s when I say this, so if you haven't watched Rocky, take a pause.
It's 50 years ago. They would.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say it was 50. And again, 50 years.
Making me feel old. But yes, he didn't win. And that's why I love it. Because every film, they always finish with a thing winning. And he won what he needed to win without winning the match. The fight. And I absolutely adore that. And however, Rocky 2 does give us the immortal line, "You're Adrian."
So yeah, and again, but the other thing as well, I was going to say, it's the exact same reason. It's why I love Rocky 1, because he doesn't win, but that's why I love Rocky 2 more, because he does finally. It's like you finally made it. You made it over the hill, and you see what happened. It's okay. We're not going to talk anymore about Rocky, because we can be here for like hours talking about this. But go on.
You can come back on season 6 and we'll finish off on Creed. The way that
don't even get me started. Creed is amazing.
No, Terry, Driving Instructor Podcast.
The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.